Our mission statement, helping everyone take their next step closer to Jesus. Patrick, why do you say it every single Sunday? We know it already, but every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. There's somebody in the room for whom that's the first time that they've heard that, and it's just such an important thing to keep in mind. It's just so easy to drift from what everything's all about and just become something else, and we just want to make sure we get laser focused on what that is. The premise of the series that we have been in, the premise of the series is this: what you believe about then shapes what you do now. What you believe about then, what you believe about eternity, what you believe about happens after you die, absolutely shapes what you do right now. Have you ever seen the movie Field of Dreams? Yes, a lot of murmurings of yes. I know it's an older movie. Some of the kids maybe haven't seen it. It is impossible to explain, and I'm not even sure how it got made, because if you're trying to pitch this movie, it just doesn't make any sense. The movie is a broke farmer about to go bankrupt starts hearing voices that tell him to plow down a bunch of his corn in order to build a baseball diamond in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. And he does it. His wife goes along with it, and she says, yeah, I guess that's fine. And then the ghosts of the 1919 Boston Red Sox, Chicago White Sox show up and start playing baseball on this field. The ghosts. This is not a money-making endeavor. Remember the Black Sox, Shoeless Joe Jackson, the scandal, all that? Yeah, we all remember that. We were all there. You know the phrase, if you build it, they will come? That's where this comes from. It comes from the movie. You build it, they will come. Well, who's they? Well, it's these ghosts, I guess. I say all that to say at one point in the movie, Shoeless Joe Jackson's playing catch with the farmer, the broke farmer. Ghost Shoeless Joe Jackson goes to run back into the corn, and he stops and he turns around and says to the broke farmer, he says, hey, is this heaven? And the broke farmer says, no, it's Iowa. The first time I ever saw that phrase, having lived in Iowa for 6 years, the first time I ever saw that phrase was on a bumper sticker. Is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. And I thought, these Iowa people need to get out like any of the other 49 states. If you think this is heaven, you should see Colorado. You should see California. You should see my home state of Oregon. Is this heaven? Now, Iowa people loved that line. I mean, it was huge for them. They thought it was pretty awesome. But I'm not sure the promise of Iowa could get me to make some of the sacrifices faith calls us to make. If God came along and said, hey, someday, if you're really good and you do all the right things, you get to go to Iowa, how many of you would be like, I'm good, actually. I think I'm all right. Apologies if you lived in Iowa or from Iowa. My oldest daughter was born in Iowa. I want you to think about verses. As if Iowa were heaven. Imagine these verses written with that promise in mind. Matthew chapter 5, or not Matthew chapter 5, verse 10. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the land of corn and pigs. Does that do it for you? No, me either. Luke 23:43, and Jesus spoke to the thief on his left, saying, today you will be with me in Iowa. You imagine the thief was like, actually, that's fine. You go ahead without me. I'll catch up. Revelation 2:10, be faithful even to the point of death, and I will give you a cornfield as your eternal reward. No, that wouldn't do it for us, right? We would not be compelled by that vision of eternity. Now, of course, nobody here thinks heaven is Iowa. None of us are confused about that. But I'm honestly pretty convinced that we're not much more excited about whatever eternity is than if it were Iowa. We're like, yeah, I think it'll be good, but I don't know. And I think that lack of excitement is exemplified in popular culture. For example, an old Far Side cartoon. Many of you have seen this. You're sitting on a cloud, you got some wings, you got a halo, and you wish you brought something to do. Or how about this? If you've read Huckleberry Finn, there's a scene in which Huckleberry Finn or Miss Watson's trying to get Huckleberry Finn to behave. And she's like, you gotta behave, because if you don't behave, you don't go to the good place. And he's like, well, what's the good place like? And she just tells him, well, you just, it's harps and singing forever and ever. And he's like, is Tom Sawyer gonna be there? And she's like, no way. And he's like, I'd rather be with Tom. That's the vision of eternity that a lot of people have. I think maybe Huckleberry Finn was saying the words someone like Mark Twain was thinking. Randy Alcorn wrote a book called Heaven, about heaven. I've referenced it before. I think it's worth reading. But he says he's startled by how many Christians aren't excited about what little they know about heaven. And he writes this: Satan doesn't have to convince us that heaven doesn't exist, only that it's boring. So I wonder if we have a compelling enough vision of heaven. No, we don't think it's Iowa, but do we think it's Nebraska? That's not much better. Now, why does any of this matter? Why does any of this matter? What does it matter? We're going to die and we're going to go somewhere and hopefully it's good. Why does any of this matter? Right before World War II, as Germany was sliding into fascism, there were people who stood up and said, this is not good. One of the big voices of that was a guy by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's a German pastor, and he saw how Nazi ideology was infiltrating churches and sermons. He started to see it from the pulpit, and he started to speak out loudly against it. He had a radio address, and I think this is a pretty clever line, but he talked about how Hitler was not a leader, but a misleader. And I think that's pretty good, but it did not make him very popular with the powers that be. And at one point, he ended up being able to escape to the United States, where he could go on a speaking tour and he could live in luxury, and people were taking care of him and his bills. And he was there just for a few months, and he thought, this isn't right. I need to be back in Germany where I can do good, where I can make a difference. So here you have the U.S. You've got luxury, you've got accolades, you've got everything you need taken care of, or you go back to this place where you might die. How do you decide between the two? How do you decide what you're going to do? How do you decide to make those kinds of sacrifices? He ended up going back to Germany to help resist Hitler, and he was captured and killed. How do you decide to do something like that? Well, one of the things Bonhoeffer said was, no one has heard about the realm of the resurrected and not been homesick from that hour. Hebrews 11:13, same thing, tells us we make value decisions based on what we think happens next. He writes, or the author writes rather, all these people were still living by faith. He's just listed a lot of people who gave up a lot of good stuff in order to do what they believed God was calling them to do. They were all living by faith when they died. Notice, they did not receive the things promised. Life here and now was not great for them. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on the earth. Instead, they were longing, homesick for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Whatever they were longing for, I don't think it was Iowa. How did Christians go from being homesick for heaven to being indifferent about eternity? How did we go from being like, man, take me, Jesus, take me now, to being like, I'm fine. I got plans. I think I'll go eventually, or I hope it works out eventually. How did that happen? How did we go from longing for something to just being, We're in this series called What Happens After We Die? What happens after we die? Today, we're going to talk about the good place. And then not next Sunday, but the following Sunday, we're going to talk about the other place. I was asking my 13-year-old, should I start with heaven or should I start with hell? And he said, start with hell. People are way more interested in hell. And I chickened out and I started with heaven. So I gave myself another 2 weeks to work on it. He's probably right. So come back next week for Mission Sunday and then 2 weeks to talk about hell. My parents were talking this week. They took me to Disney World. I had forgotten I'd ever been, or Disneyland rather. I'd forgotten that I'd been to Disneyland, but they took me to Disneyland when I was 4 years old. I was 4 years old. The year was 1981. And the price of admission, we should do a quiz, but I'll just tell you. The price of admission was $9.50. Yeah, at those prices, you'd be like, I'm taking the whole church to Disneyland. We're all going. My parents actually had a coupon, and they said it made it $4.50 a person. $4.50. Now, I had entirely forgotten about this trip. I just didn't remember it at all until they said, you didn't want to ride on any of the rides but one. There was one ride that you rode on over and over and over again. The ride is called It's a Small World After All. And evidently, I didn't want to ride Pirates of the Caribbean. I didn't want to ride Space Mountain. I wanted to ride It's a Small World after all. My parents had spent all that money to take me to Disneyland, and I was just stuck in my small little world. By the way, the fact that I couldn't remember it just tells you you should just get your 4-year-old a cardboard box. They're going to have more fun. You don't need to spend all that money to go to Disney World. And I thought, when we were talking this, my dad was like, yeah, we just went to that one ride over and over. And I thought my mom would stand up for me and defend me and just say, oh, yeah, but you were only 4. And she was like, no, that awful song gets stuck in your head and it's terrible. I couldn't break out of my small little world. I think we have a very small idea of heaven, and it may be ruining it for us. And because it's ruining it for us, that we live very uncompelling lives here because we have an uncompelling vision of the future. What comes to mind when you think about heaven? What comes to mind when you think about heaven? We're going to do a short multiple choice quiz, okay? You can't answer this if you're related to me or you're in the booth back there. I know you guys love to shout out the answers. Real quick, Patrick grew up on this island nation. Was it Thailand, Taiwan, Toledo, or Tahiti? Is that the consensus? Taiwan? Yeah, how many? Thailand? Any Thailand? Okay. Yeah, a couple of you. The correct answer is Taiwan. That is very good. Taiwan, that's where I grew up. A lot of people are like, you grew up in Taiwan. It's an actual country. You should get to know geography and world events. It's its own country, by the way, despite what other countries say about it. All right. So I grew up in Taiwan, 11 to when I graduated high school. The official language of Taiwan is this: Chinese, Taiwanese, Mandarin, or English. It's a little harder. Mandarin. Any other answers? I heard Mandarin the most. English, Chinese. According to Wikipedia, the official language of Taiwan is, in fact, Mandarin. That's correct. Very good. You guys are like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, past 5th grade social studies. This is wonderful. Very good. Okay, third and final question. The word Mandarin, which is the official language of Taiwan, which is a Southeast Asian country, it comes from this language: Portuguese, Chinese, French, or English. How many of you are pulling up Google right now and cheating? I know my nephew is, because he's got the right answer, and I know he doesn't know it. The correct answer is that the word Mandarin, which is the official language of a Southeast Asian country, comes from the Portuguese language. How in the world did a Portuguese word come to describe the language that is native to the majority or the most people on earth? English is the most spoken language on earth because a lot of people speak it as a second language, but Mandarin is the number 1 native language in the world. 1.138 billion people, and somehow we call it by this Portuguese word. How does that happen? Because English is a nutty language. It's a crazy language, and the meanings of words change constantly, and we borrow from here, and we use here, and we corrupt this, and we get this over here. We got all kinds of ideas about where these words come from. Something similar has happened with the word heaven. And I think it's valuable to talk about, because when we say the word heaven, we are actually using a word populated with a lot of wrong ideas or unclear ideas, maybe is a better way to put it. So let's talk about this. When you read the Bible, the very first time you see the word heaven is where in the Bible? Fun trivia quiz. The very first verse, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's the word heaven. Now, when God says, I created the heavens and the earth, what he's talking about is he's talking about the skies and space and clouds and anything that you would look up to see or anything that you might glance through a telescope. It's actual physical place. He's not saying, I created the place of God and the earth. He's saying, I created space and clouds and stars and earth. Just in a few verses later, he's going to say, I created the heavens and the earth, and I put birds in the heavens. They're up in space. They're up in the clouds. And so some modern translations of the Bible have begun to use the word skies and earth to help with this distinction. So back in the day, when people were like, we need to get to where God is, they would build towers like the Tower of Babylon. We got to get real high because that's where God is. Or if we want to worship God, we got to go up on a mountain because we got to climb up there because that's where God is. He's up there in space because we don't see him down here, so he must be up there. So the word heaven is literally just physical clouds, sky, stars, atmosphere, space, all of that. The second way the word heaven gets used a lot in the Bible is to describe the place of God. In fact, verses like Psalm 103, verse 19, the Lord has established his throne in heaven. Now, if you send up enough satellites or rockets or astronauts, you're not going to look around and see a throne. But the psalmist, in a poetic way, is saying that God is in charge of everything, that he's in charge of the whole universe. Every corner of creation, God rules it. So it became a stand-in for describing the throne room of God. And then the third way heaven gets used is to talk about the spiritual realm, things that are heavenly. So, for example, John 3:12, where Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus, and I've spoken to you of earthly things you don't believe. How are you going to get it if I speak to you about heavenly things? And these are things that are about God and of God. So you've got three different definitions. You've got space, physical space. You've got where God is in control. And then you've got things of God, or things that we would probably use the word spiritual. It's very abstract. Those are the three different ways that the Bible tends to use the word heaven. We combined all those ideas into one, and we said, oh, this must be heaven. When the Bible talks about heaven, it's something else, somewhere else, out there, up there, and it's probably not really physical. It's not really a place. It's some sort of spiritual realm. It's the 50th dimension. It's something different. It's where we all go when we die. We're going to croak, and then we're going to go off and flutter off to heaven. And we love singing the song, I'll fly away, because we're going to leave this earth and we're going to go to heaven. That's the basic general concept that we've had of this idea of eternity. We've combined all these ideas in the Bible, and we've said heaven is somewhere else. It's where God is. It's not physical or tangible. Our spirit goes up there, and that has become the standard idea of heaven. And we tell people, and we've thought about this, we've said this, hey, when great-grandpa Joe passed away, he's with the angels in heaven. And when your cat passed away, well, he's with the cat angels in heaven. They're up there somewhere. They're not here, so they're in the great beyond. And that's the whole deal, right? In fact, I think some people would say, yeah, that's Christianity in a nutshell. You try to do good things, you try to live a good life, so that when you die, you become a spirit being that floats off into this plane of existence that we can't see, that we call heaven. Now, some of you are like, well, yeah, that is what you're setting this up like that's not right, Patrick. That is the whole thing. Actually, that's not how the Bible talks about it. And I think this is fascinating, and I think this contributes to the fact that we don't have this compelling vision of eternity. In fact, I think our collective definition of heaven gets in the way of what the Bible speaks about eternity. And I don't think the Bible authors, maybe they wouldn't wag their finger at us, but I don't think they would use the language, we die and we go off to heaven. Here's an example of how our definitions of these concepts can make it hard to see what God's talking about. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. But in keeping with his promise, this is Peter, somebody who walked and talked with Jesus. In keeping with his promise, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth. Wait, the phrase "a new earth" is kind of goofy. Haven't heard that much before. A new earth, and where do we first see the phrase "heaven and earth" in one place? Genesis 1:1, the very beginning of all creation. And here Peter is telling us that his understanding of what happens when it comes next is that God is going to recreate everything. Interesting. A new heaven and a new earth. Now, this is throwback language to the Old Testament. A new sky and a new world. And what promise is he talking about there? What is that all about? Well, if you rewind about 700 years before this time to Isaiah chapter 65, verse 17, Isaiah, the prophet, writes, God speaking, "See, I will create a new heavens and a new earth." Huh. That's interesting. A new heavens and a new earth, a new space, a new sky, a new universe. What is that all about? Patrick, my mind is not liking this kind of stuff. Interesting. Paul actually wrote a pretty strange verse in the book of Romans that we just kind of skip over because we're like, I don't know what that means. It's weird. So let's just go on to something that makes more sense. But in Romans chapter 8, verse 21, Paul writes, creation itself, everything that God spoke into existence will one day be liberated from bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. What does that mean? That's so weird. Now, I could go on and on. I could give you all kinds of verses and examples of this. There's lots of examples of it. But I think what it would suffice to say is that what we have come to call heaven, and often misunderstood or dismissed as boring or uninspiring, is God restoring all of creation for us to experience His goodness without interruption. God restoring all things for us to experience His goodness without interruption. I don't know, do any of you have like a nearly perfect memory of a moment that just like, if I could just go back and live 10 minutes of that once again, it would just fill my heart. Just a perfect memory. I don't know, maybe think of the most perfect meal you've ever had. Just every bite, and you're just like, I don't want this to end. Have you ever been in a situation where you ate fast because you didn't want to lose like the experience of what this was? Or then other moments where you're just like savor and eat it slowly? Have you ever been at a restaurant eating food, talking about another meal that you had one time because it was so good and it just so lodged in your brain? You're literally stuffing your face. And I remember this one time when we were having this barbecue and it was the most amazing thing. People literally travel thousands of miles and make reservations months, sometimes years in advance, to sit down at a table of a celebrated chef to experience this particular meal. Maybe that's your perfect memory. Or how about an experience of listening to music, where you're just like, if you could go back and capture what it was like to be at that concert with those people all belting out the same song. Paul McCartney was just here in town. I didn't go, but I would imagine it would have been transcendent to sing Hey Jude with thousands of other people in a stadium. It would have been amazing to just get lost in the moment. It's even fun to go to like Twins games and sing Don't Stop Believin' when they're down. And you're just like, it's just fun. There's just a moment. Or maybe it's just like a song from your teenage years where you could go in your room and shut the door and turn on the record player because you're old real loud, and you could just listen to that song and just have the music kind of wash over you. And it's just this memory of just perfection. Maybe it's about being in nature. Chris mentioned this earlier in the communion talk, where it's just perfect. It's the perfect temperature. It's the perfect breeze. The trees are turning the perfect color. You can't stop looking. I was talking to Corinne about this yesterday. We were just admiring the fall foliage, and it just feels like such an old person thing to do. And I'm just like, what happened when I was a kid? I was like, yeah, leaves, great, whatever, dead leaves, moving on. And now that I get older, I'm just like, wow, God's wondrous creation. Let's drive somewhere and look at the leaves. If you had told me when I got older, as a kid, when I got older, I would drive somewhere to look at leaves, I would have thought, you've lost your mind. I might as well move to Iowa. What else is there left for me to do? A few years ago, Corinne and I got to take a trip out to California, and we drove north on the Pacific Coast Highway. I don't know, I haven't been everywhere in the world, but it is beautiful. We had no timeline. We could stop at every little roadside stop we wanted to. We could look at everything. We could wander through the redwoods and the sequoias. We could wander along the beach. We could look at the mountains. I mean, it was just absolute perfection. It was unbelievable. Or what about this? What about being able to devote yourself to a project that just is life-giving, that you love doing? That you're just like, you lose time because you're so deeply engaged in what you're doing, the work before you. Most Americans don't like their jobs, and they think that they don't like work, but most Americans just don't like the work they're doing. But if somebody would pay you to do whatever it is that you just lose yourself in, you would do it forever. You would do it forever. Think about some of the moments with friends and family and laughter, and you're just soaking in every second. Those moments, they're perfect, aren't they? They're just perfect for a few seconds. And then your phone buzzes, and it's an email from your boss, and the deadline was passed, and you forgot all about it. And all of a sudden, the anxiety races. Or you're enjoying this perfect moment, and then you have a reminder, oh, that loved one that I long to be with, they're no longer with us. And that perfect moment is ruined because they're not there anymore. Or it's a headline, breaking news, something else terrible in the world has happened. See, sadness, pain, guilt, deadlines, death, they interrupt God's goodness. They interrupt it. These perfect moments God has given us, they interrupt it. See, some people are afraid of heaven because they're afraid to miss out on the best of what life has to offer. I remember being a kid growing up in the church, and I thought, God, I do want to go to heaven, but not yet. I want to go to heaven, but after I've experienced some things. I want to be with you, but later on in life, I want to do some things first. We're afraid of eternity because we're afraid of missing out on the best of what this life has to offer. I want to go, but not yet. But here's what I believe. I believe that Scripture teaches that heaven, or the new heavens and the new earth, is the best of what life has to offer, and God is gifting you that to experience without interruption for eternity. That is the best. You're not missing out. It's not like God is going to pluck you out of this life and say, ha-ha, now you have to sit on a cloud with me in Iowa. No, he is giving you something wonderful and good, but we have lost the vision of what it is. There's one last little thing I think that's important to think about, and this only is true if you've experienced some sort of chronic illness or pain or you're getting older. Luke chapter 24, verse 39, I think this is so interesting. Jesus says, look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. This is Jesus. He's died. He's been crucified, nails driven in his arms and feet, comes back to life, and the apostles are like, it's a ghost. And Jesus says, no, I'm not a ghost. I made this point before, but I think it's worth making it again. Jesus doesn't say, there are no such thing as ghosts. He just says, I'm not one. And he says, look at me, look, touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. How many of you would like a renewed body? You're like, I could use a few, a little work here and there, drop a few pounds. But what if, as you get older, what if you experience, I'm telling you, this happened to me the other day. I was talking to somebody, and I'm sitting, our chairs were arranged like this, and this person was over here. And I had to turn my head slightly for about 20 minutes. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to hurt in the morning. Can you imagine if somebody's like, hey, Patrick, how'd you hurt your neck? I had a 20-minute conversation. I was facing slightly the wrong direction. I mean, don't you want like a renewed body, like a renewed physical body? And maybe you'll have some suggestions for God and what he could change and make look a little better, or a little skinnier, or a little bit more toned. But don't you want that? A body that doesn't wear out, a body that doesn't get sore, a body that doesn't fall apart. See, I think what we refer to heaven is a new heaven and a new earth where our longing to experience God and his goodness is just eternally satisfied. See, I don't think God is unknowable, but Richard Rohr says God is endlessly discoverable, where your curiosity will just lead you further and further and further, and you'll have all the time in the world to explore who he is and what he's done and why he's done what he's done. I want to wrap up with this, Revelation 21, verse 1. Revelation 21, verse 1. You have it in Isaiah, the promise of a new heaven and a new earth, a new physical reality. You have it in 2 Peter, where he reiterates that promise from Isaiah, a new heaven and a new earth, a new physical reality. And then John, the apostle, is given a vision of what is to come, and he says the same thing. He says in verse 1, he says, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And really that probably means the way things are here and now have passed away. And there was no longer any sea. I would love to talk about that, but sea represented just scary chaos for people. And John was saying all that scary uncertainty, awfulness that doesn't exist in this place. Verse 2, I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem. That might get them excited. We're still like, yeah, Jerusalem, that's fine. But he's trying to tell, I saw this perfect. I saw perfection coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. We're not going to be with God. God is coming to be with us. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and will be their God. And look at this. It's given people so much comfort for thousands of years. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. For that old way, that old order, just things, how they are here and now, that's gone. That's passed away. I did a thought experiment this week. I've seen other people do it, so it's not original to me. But the thought experiment was original. And what it is you just go throughout your day and you just think about everything that pops into your mind that won't exist in the new heavens and the new earth, that won't exist in eternity. And I thought I'll come up with a few things. Oh, my list got real long, real fast. And I want to read it to you. And I'll be fast, I promise. But I want you to think about, man, what things will not be there that will just make the new heavens and the new earth so perfect. So here's what I came up with in alphabetical order. X was hard, by the way, because there's probably xylophones in heaven. In the new heavens and the new earth, there will be no more anxiety or addictions, no anger or Amber Alerts, no more bankruptcy, no broken bones, broken relationships, no body dysmorphia, no more courtrooms or child abuse or chemo because there's no cancer. And there are no car accidents, there's no counting calories, there's no cable news, no colonoscopies, no more criticism, no need for CPS, no more death, no more disease, no more divorce, no more depression, no more drunk drivers, no more dread, no more dementia, no more deadlines, no more deportation, no more ego or earthquakes or elections, no more empty promises, no exclusion or emergency rooms, no fear-mongering, no foreclosures, no funerals, no genocide, no gossip, no greed, no grief, no graveyards, no guilt, no more government shutdowns because there is no more government. No more hypocrisy, no hypertension, no homelessness or hopelessness or heart attacks or hurricanes, no more injustice, no more infertility, no more jealousy, no more junk mail, no more legalism or long lines or lying awake at night, no more miscarriages, no more misinformation, no more missing out, no more messing up, no more medical bills, no need for neonatal ICUs, no nursing homes, no oppression, no orphanages, no poverty, no performance reviews, no political parties. No relapse, no root canals, no regret, no road rage, no shame, no more second guessing, no more starvation, no more sexual assaults, no more suicide, no more school shootings, no more traffic jams, no more trafficking, no more taxes, no more tumors, no more terrorists, no more tiny caskets, no more 3 a.m. calls, no more unmet needs, unwanted children, unloved people, no more violence, no more waiting rooms, no more wasted time or wasted opportunities, no more wondering why or what if, no more Xanax, no more yelling, and no more Zoom calls. In the new heavens and the new earth, and look at what he wraps up by saying, verse 5, he who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. There's so much more we could say, so much more we could talk about. Maybe questions you have, please come talk to me. But I just want to wrap up by stating it this way, that an underwhelming vision of eternity will produce an underwhelming faith on earth. Because, okay, God, I get to go to Iowa? Great. You know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and try to carve out a life of luxury here and now, because it doesn't sound like the promise that is to come is very good. An underwhelming vision of eternity will produce an underwhelming faith. And so we always ask this question at the end of our messages, but it's this: what is your next step? And God has made it freely available. He's offered it. It's a free gift. Just step toward eternity with him. Step toward the promise of a new heaven and a new earth.